Awesome. So hi, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you all so much for participating today. Just let us know where you're coming in from the chat. We're so excited to have you back at day 2 of Women Who Code Connect Digital 2020. Thank you for joining us for this Supporting People of Color in Tech panel. Our moderator for today is Tarzine Jackson. She is the CEO and founder of Koalesce Design. So Tarzine, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. So first, I would like to introduce the panel guests. So if everybody can please introduce yourselves. Let's start with Swathi.
Hi, I'm Swathi. I'm a software engineer at Zuora.
Hi, I'm Sparkle Russell-Puleri. I'm a data scientist at Genentech.
Hi there, I'm Sagray. I am a UX manager at Google.
Hi. There we go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was already introduced, so go ahead.
Okay.
I just thought about that.
Hi, I'm Erica Baity, Director of Data Integration and Management with Bridgetree.
And I'm Adam Eivy, a Principal Software Engineer at the Walt Disney Company.
And this panel is about supporting people of color in tech. So I guess first I would start off with a few questions that the group have kind of posed or we heard about. And the first question is an organizational question. If an organization or a business has had previous bias in their company, how does that company plan to prevent that in the future? And I'm going to pose that to the more senior managers of my panel guests. I guess I'll start with Erica.
Well, one of the ways that you can prevent that bias from occurring in the future is, I'm all for open communication. You always want to make sure that HR is involved. And you also want to make sure that you have an open forum that allows your employees or your team members to really express themselves without feeling judged, and encourage that open communication between leadership as well as those that are actually building the company and supporting the processes. And it's just a matter of making sure that leadership also sets the tone that whatever issues are plaguing the company or whatever issues are contributing to those biases, that they will not tolerate it. I think too often, companies have a tendency to brush things up under the rug and say, I'm gonna slap you on the wrist and move forward. But a company really has to take a stand and let it be known from the top down that it's not tolerated and display what those consequences are if they were to occur.
That's great. Adam or Aaron?
Yeah, I think it's important. Some companies have positioned people in leadership roles. At my company we have a chief diversity officer that's an SVP role. That's a step in the right direction, but it's a lot more than just putting people in roles, right? We've got a Black female chief of police in Seattle, but that doesn't mean we don't have police violence, right? There's things that you have to do at the ground level, at the individual contributor level, at the communication, listening, and empathy, and having training classes in your company can really help with that. That's something we're really big on, is just getting people to learn about how to communicate better and how to, do mindfulness better and all of that.
One of the things that Google has done over the past couple of years is really put an emphasis on unbiasing. I take unbiasing classes twice a year. I think it's important for all of us to remember that we have implicit biases as humans, and to be cognizant of those biases and to really think critically about how we're perceiving other people on our teams. Another thing that Google has done is we did a multi-year study on what makes for a successful team. And there's really three things that came out of that. The first is to have, the team needs to have meaning and impact. It needs to have clear goals. And most importantly, needs to have psychological safety. And psychological safety is developed by creating mutual respect on the team, ensuring that everyone has the right to be heard and the right to speak. And this is the job of everyone on the team to keep each other accountable to that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone saying about that, especially with the training, the bias training at Google. That's a great step in the right direction. I'm happy that we're having this conversation. Another question was posed as, and Swathi posed this as a developer, especially new to the field. I think this is your second job, Swathi?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she says, as a person of color, how does one develop and grow their career in an organization that does not have a person of color in leadership or an executive position?
Yeah, so originally when I was working at my first job, it took a couple of years for me to break out of this mentality, but it's so easy to get caught up with, like, you know, everyone who's in leadership looks very different, and it's very difficult to picture yourself one day being in that position just because they look so different. There's a huge gap. And I think one of the hardest things to do is to break down that, like, societal feelings that we put into place to say, hey, you need someone to look like you and pave the way for you before you're ready to even consider taking that position or seeing yourself. So one of the things that I personally found super helpful was to break that down and reach out to people in leadership positions within my company and even outside of my company and say, hey, I look very different from you. I have a very different background from you, but I want to grow my career and one day do something similar to you. Do you have any advice? And basically reach out and take that time to build that advocate and all of that mentorship and guidance. And it's a difficult thing to do, especially when they look so different, but I think it's super important to take that first step and say, hey, maybe one day I'll be the first female CTO in my company.
Yes. Let's see. Do you have any other advice as any senior leadership or anybody else?
Yeah, I have some advice. You know, I work for a company where there are only 3 people of color, and they're all female. There are no men of color within the organization. I am the only female and the only person of color in technical leadership. And one of the things that I had to do was, you know, come in, hit the ground running, right? Make a name for myself within the organization and get outside of my comfort zone and find an advocate for me. And I am so grateful that I do have an advocate for me who values the skills and knowledge that I bring to the table and he ensures that I have a seat and a voice at the table. So, you know, it's a matter of you cannot look at, you know, them as being different from you because they are not the same gender or they're not the same race, ethnicity. You really have to be the artist of your career. And sometimes that means, not sometimes, most times it means stepping out of your comfort zone and approaching those who don't look like you, who are in those positions. And your gut will tell you if you found someone who is truly an advocate for pushing you forward. Follow your gut instincts on that one.
Thank you. And Sparkle, do you have anything else to add on this?
Yeah, I come from pretty much the perspective of most of my career was actually helped by people that don't look like me. So I've built that confidence up, and I've started like Swathi. You always ask that question of, you know, how would they react? But I've got to the point where it's like the worst they can say is no. So I think it's just a matter of stepping out of that comfort zone and knowing that just like when you go in a supermarket and you're looking for the best fruit, you got to try until you find the one that actually fits you. It's like building any mentorship or sponsorship relationship. Some are going to work, some aren't going to work, but it's just finding that organic connection and then going from there. I've been very fortunate to have allies that speak up and pull me into things and make sure that I do have a seat at the table and my skills and voice. It's being always the only Black female in a highly technical role, having that ally and that voice that sees your skills and value it is key. But just you have to take that first step and just, go at it as you're just talking to any other human being. And sometimes it just works out, and you'll be surprised that you have more in common than you think. Once you look past what you see with the naked eye.
I think there's an interesting thing that happens there too when you have two people or a group of people that get together that have vastly different backgrounds. Is you learn and grow from each other, and you are introduced to perspectives that you yourself might not have otherwise encountered. And I've found that very rewarding personally.
Yeah, I've actually hired a number of interns just because they've hit me up on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm in Seattle and I'm interested in tech, and do you want to get coffee?" That was easier before the pandemic, but you can get a Zoom call with people. I really recommend find people in your industry. Now that everybody's like on Zoom and these platforms, you can find people that not even in your geocode, but just reach out to people and say, "Hey, I just want to pick your brain about your position in your industry, or the company you work for, whatever." And hit up a bunch of people. Some people will reply, and some people will set up meetings, and that's a really good way to find people that are then going to say, think, "Oh, I know somebody who is interested in this, and I've got a role that's open, and I can refer them." And that's a lot of people. This industry is very much who you know and who you met and who can help you.
What Erica said earlier about going with your gut on this, I think to expand on that as well, the people that really want to help, if they can't personally help you themselves, they'll try to find someone else that can help you. They're not going to just leave you hanging.
Yep, and I agree. And also to the converse of that, sometimes I think we get caught up in that, hey, we don't necessarily have as much to give or as much experience to share. But I think we all do, whether we're an individual contributor or a manager or in leadership. And that if there is a mentorship program in your company, or if an intern joins, it is important to reach out, because you are growing the next generation.
Yeah. And it goes both ways. I think it touched on something that you said, Swathi and Aaron. Sometimes people tend to think that it comes from the bottom up. Sometimes someone at an IC level actually has enough to share to someone at a level. I've found interns very useful in finding out things in the company that I don't know, and I've been there long enough. So it sort of goes both ways in that, learning from someone at a very different level also kind of helps you learn about things you didn't know existed in the company you've been in for a long time. So it kind of builds that, two-way street relationship.
Yes. And I want to expand on that also, because some individuals don't know the difference between an advisory, a mentor, and a sponsor. So I want to break that down also so people can understand what each role is. And advisory is something like they will, "Hey, I don't know this, but I can refer you to somebody else." And somebody who's a mentor, even though we always say mentor has been thrown around so many times, a mentor is somebody who is invested in your career and will help you with those steps and will at least walk you to the building. A sponsor is somebody who's also invested in your career, will walk you to the building, to the door, and also to the table. So my suggestion would be find one good sponsor, find a couple of mentors to help you, and find a dozen of advisories, and build your network, build your tribe to help you with your career goals. Does anybody want to expand on what I said, or?
No, that was beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next question in regards to, let's talk about how would organizations and companies plan to continue this type of conversation in regards to race, in regards to privilege, in regards to bias? How do they plan to continue this conversation past today, like 6 months, 8 months, a year from now? I noticed that in a recent article that Google has stepped up about talking about, curbing some of the bias that was plaguing the company before. Do you want to expand on that, Aaron?
I could talk a little bit about that. I think it's a good start. I think, like every other company, there's a lot of work to do. But I think the fact that this has been emphasized from the top is so important. And it's very difficult to get movements going within a corporation bottoms up. It's very risky for your career. It is possible, but it's much easier when your executives are very aware and are sponsoring the momentum.
Oops, sorry.
I'll just wrap up by saying that the thing that you can do that's actionable for anyone within a company is to help educate your executives. Mm-hmm. And you could do that by sending them emails. You could do them by pulling your manager aside and working through your manager up the ladder. But everyone has the ability to influence. And that's, I think, a good place to start.
I really love that you said that, Aaron, because I've been saying that for a long time, and I'm happy that you are a part of this conversation. And also, I would like to welcome Nancy to the panel. Is she on? Well, as soon as she come on. We can't hear you.
Guys, I'm having some technical difficulties over here with my computer pulling this up, my laptop, so I'm using it with my phone. I don't like shaky things, so I'm trying to make a stand. But my name is Nancy. I have worked for a number of companies and now run my own lab. So I've worked at Google, Cisco, IBM, and Intel. And I have a lot to say about this topic, being that I've been in this world for many, many years and have kind of created a good opportunity to help technology companies think about how their products damage or improve cultures around the world. So we look at inclusiveness in our design process, and a lot of the conversation relates come out into this world.
Hey, Nancy.
Working or not working for it.
Nancy.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry about that. So we had a question, and I'll rephrase it, repose the question. We had a question on in regards to how would organization and building and businesses plan to continue this conversation, the conversation that we're having about supporting people of color in tech. How do they plan to continue this conversation now and also in the future, like 6 months, a year, 2 years from now?
So I will tell you what I've been helping organizations do is consider changing things from a compliance software standpoint. So the idea would be, how do we become more transparent with the information we have that's as far as our culture? And so a company called M-Train looks at workplace culture and uses compliance software, harassment, racism, things like that, and opinion mining to present transparency across the company about how you fare against others. And they leverage real life examples of videos. So for example, we recently released a video on Black Lives Matter and police shooting and how to discuss that at work. And so the idea would be, there are some questions we might ask about how people feel about, for example, All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. And it can help create a conversation in the workplace and create an opportunity to create some actions behind how to change those things in that atmosphere. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes.
But it's a way to systematically take a look at something that you must do annually anyway and see if you can, over time, leverage metrics to improve upon the process and be transparent about it if you're not doing well. And so by sharing your culture out to the public and or across your company and letting them see over time if things get better or not, it's one way for you guys to keep the conversation going, but also to have some level of data to show if you're improving or not across your workplace culture.
Thank you.
Measuring goals is huge.
Yeah.
Got to measure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got another thing to add. I'm going to drop a link here into the chat for everybody. Harvard has this awesome implicit association test. I sent this to my team and my manager took it and said, oh wow, this is, I learned some things about myself. So this is a really cool test just to see where your subconscious bias has collected and simplified the bucketing of things. And you can test yourself on race, genders, all religion, all kinds of things. So this is a great thing to just do periodically, right? Do this every Saturday morning. Try a different one, once a month, whatever your cadence. Just because if you can't, in order to fight against your subconscious bias, you have to be aware of what that subconscious bias is, right? We're all being trained by our interactions and things. Our brains are just simplification machines. So you got to be aware.
Yes. And also Stanford, and I'll drop a link in there too. Stanford has a program, a PhD program that they're actually studying about organizational behaviors. And they did a number of studies that I've been reading about organizational behavior and different methods that they use. Like, for example, the accountability method that everybody's been calling for, like hold it accountable towards money. And, does somebody get a bonus? Do somebody get fired? And there's the study, a couple of the studies were very eye-opening, because sometimes if you do equate that to funds, some employees might make it even more of a hostile workplace. So these are things that we also need to talk about. It's like having that conversation and then not having it moderated properly. It's like, oh, hey, you guys work it out on your own. No, that's not going to work all the time. Sometimes people don't want to have that conversation, or they don't know how to have that conversation. And they might not have the same views, but the point is that they come together as one and be okay. Like, I respect you, even though I don't appreciate your views or I don't understand it, but I respect you as a person and you respect me, and that we can coexist, because at the end of the day, you still have to work together.
I want to circle back to a comment, and it bothers me. I want to know why we feel that pushing it from the bottom up is risky. Because if I'm within an organization and I want this to sustain itself and last, and I don't see it coming from the top down, then am I supposed to sit there and not do anything? Sometimes change should come from the bottom up. And you have to ask yourself, do I want to work for an organization they want to completely ignore the issues that are going on? So my advice is, if you don't see it happening from the top down, don't be afraid to move from the bottom up. And if they're not going to do anything, then really ask yourself, is that a company that you want to be associated with?
And sorry.
You want to?
I was just going to add on to that. And to Erica's point, a lot of times company will say, hey, this is our company culture, right? I would actually argue against that and say, that's not your company culture. Your employees determine what your company culture is, right? It's not the CEO, it's everyone under. So it is up to us. We do have more power than we think we do to speak up and say, hey, this is okay, this is not okay, and to set the boundaries and the limits and the precedents.
Yeah.
Can I provide some suggestions? I'm a really practical, high-functioning kind of gal, and I think it's easier said than done. So I want to give some practical tips that maybe people can use. One thing that I do is I talk about leveraging your privilege and real examples of doing that. So for example, if you're in a room and you notice that there's mostly men in the room and maybe there's another person that's a woman, leveraging your privilege in that space would be saying, hey, you know what? I want to hear what Nancy has to say. That's both for men and women. Or, for example, if you are, in my particular case, I was at a sales conference, I'm in product, but I went to a sales conference at a very large corporation where they had every speaker was a white male and every performer was a Black individual or child. Very much, they were not aware of it. I leveraged my privilege as being part of the organization to contact the organizers and let them know that they were basically continuing a stereotype by presenting this to over 19,000 people. And so at first they fought back because they will push back a little bit, you know, and said, we've never had this concern brought up before, but their VP actually decided to listen to the conversation, realized it was a real problem, and then decided to change his programming going forward. But that took somebody in a position within a company and leveraging their privilege to make movement. So the idea is that we can actually make concrete steps to making some change, but I personally think it's not as easy to say, well, if they don't do it, I need to just find another company. Definitely there are companies that care, but if you want to stick to the company and make change within the company and you're adamant about that and you want to do it from the bottom up, sometimes you need to skip levels and contact the people who have the actual power to do something and let them know how they can leverage their privilege with practical steps.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting with influence. What I've seen that hasn't worked in a lot of cases is where someone decides, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to do it all by myself, and that in certain environments that'll put a target on your back. But it can start to build a groundswell by, as Nancy was saying, working through other people within the organization. Then you're multiplying the power of your ideas.
That's great. Anybody else want to say?
My one of the things that came to mind is just pretty much how do you have this be sort of a standalone? Because I think the fear is that if you have to put things through HR involving sort of change, a lot of things get tied up into HR, and then most people don't trust having to go down our HR path to drive change, or get to say, okay, let's work with someone on that side to get these things implemented. How do you circumvent these sort of restrictions that are placed on sort of systems like this to drive these sort of changes, because they're sensitive topics to talk about. So you can truly make change, because there's always that let's talk to HR to make sure it's the right conversation to have, or there's a slide that they have and it's just very general and doesn't capture all of the things that you would want to change in an organization. It's sort of, is there going to be, to Nancy's point, an area where these companies have an opportunity to have an arbitrary body help guide with these sort of conversations and keeping it going, versus our HR department that has the company's interests in mind? Yeah.
Can I please co-sign on that and amen? Because I personally, I'm in product. It's easier for me to implement change in product and have someone listen to me than it is for me to go through HR and have a diversity issue be heard. And it's partly because I don't think they have the power. And I think it's also partly because that role is to protect the company. So a lot of the time it ends up becoming almost like a PR thing versus an actual heart thing, soul thing. The company's behind it. It's almost as if it's pushed off to HR to solve, but it's not something that's on everybody's plate. And it's the responsibility of everyone, whether you're in sales, product, HR. But sometimes, to Erica's point about it can suck when there's not both sides kind of working together. Sometimes it comes from the top and they say it, but it doesn't filter down. It just doesn't get to those OKRs or that bottom line. It just doesn't. It's just a feeling. It becomes like a false mission. And sometimes it does try to get to from the bottom, and we've tried that, and literally our bottleneck ends up being our own managers, who, won't promote us because we talk about it too much, And so it really is a full systematic issue, and it's something that we got to talk about as well, from this, the system isn't built to make this succeed, and we have to break some feelings. I think today is a great time to really have this conversation about breaking down some walls and giving some power behind this to make some change.
That's wonderful. I am happy that we have all these panel guests up here to bring perspective and their knowledge and their experience. So I appreciate everyone. So I have another question. So recently, I have been asked, like so many other people of color have been asked, especially Black people, been asked by non-Black people, what will people of color need from their allies? And so I'm gonna pose this question to our panel guests. I already have my answer on there, but I'm gonna post it to Nancy. I see you nipping at the bit. Like you have an answer.
I got a whole article about it. But I guess I could start. You know. Yeah.
Okay, so Okay, so you go first, and then I Adam goes second, and then I go third. How about that?
I'll say that, you know, I happen to have, I guess, a great deal of white friends because all of them have been contacting me as of late. And, you know, it's been really interesting that it hasn't necessarily been a, are you okay? It's been a, help me, you know, which I have to say because of the work that I do in building from an inclusive place, I know that privilege informs how we design solutions for other people. And I know that we naturally go to a self-serving place. It's not an insulting thing to think about, like, how do I self-soothe right now? Because the world's in pain and I feel something too. So people have been, you know, coming to me, not with solutions, but asking me for, first of all, basic understanding. And I respond that the least you can do is do the same thing I had to do and get a basic understanding as well. There are so many resources available.
Oh, she froze. Okay, Adam, take it away.
I was just going to point out, somebody commented a listening ear. I think listening and doing some research and reading is kind of the number one. It's, you know, finding out what the situation in history is. I think if you haven't yet, you know, reading up on white fragility and things like that is really powerful. So yeah, just research and listening.
Thank you, Adam. You want to continue your point, Nancy? You got it? Yep. Okay, so I'll finish mine. You gotta love live. So when I was asked that question, and I was asked by a lot of people of like, what can we do? And my response is like that posed the question back to me. And I was like, for one, it wasn't our problem to start. Like we're consumer of this particular environment that we're in. So why do I have to be the one that suggests a solution for it? I said we should together come up with solutions, because this is new to you, but it's not new to us, but we already know. But we should come up with a solution together as a team, a friend, a family member, or that is non-Black, that's like, how can we help? It's like, let's decide this together, because it's also new for us. It's like, you know, hey, you know, somebody's actually listening to me. And it's like at the end of the day, you know, I would like to start that civil rights, the history of civil rights was tailored around white comfort. And in order to be successful in today's society, people of color, especially Black people, feel the need to conform and to be accepted. And now that's in the forefront. And I don't want to speak for every single Black person or every single white person, but it seems like more our white counterparts are feeling uncomfortable, because now this is they've been kind of thrown in the forefront, like, hey, this bias is real, even though it's been around. So how do we have those uncomfortable conversations in order to progress?
Yeah.
For me, be genuine. If you know in your heart that you're not ready, don't come to me. You know, don't be caught up in the moment and feel that you have to do something. So evaluate your heart and see, you know, and ask yourself if you're ready to peel back, open up Pandora's box because it's going to be some real raw conversations that will have to occur within yourself, as well as with that person of color that you're wanting to contact with, right? Connect with. And you have to be willing to let go of your biases. You know, society has pretty much gotten us to the point where we want to associate only with people who look like us. And when we're in the workplace, I know as a Black woman for a while, I was fake at work. I was not who I truly was, right? And so now I pretty much just threw that out the window. You accept me for who I am or not, and I'll take my skills and talent elsewhere. But do some soul searching and be willing to listen and hear what it is that person has to say. And don't be offended, because we've had to keep this stuff locked away for many, 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 many years. And that person may not, return the same emotion and feeling back to you when you reach out, but stand strong. And if you're true in your intent, follow through. But if you're not, don't even try to have the conversation, because you will quickly reveal yourself.
Yes.
I totally agree with you, Erica. Don't come to me if you don't do your homework. There's a lot of information, a lot of resources, and don't rely on me to educate you on something that's been around for a very long time.
Snap that.
I wasn't born in this country, so talking about race is very easy for me because it was never something I had to worry about. So I just prefer we just have a conversation about it. And, we can grow together, because oftentimes you find out that we have more in common than we actually do think we don't. So it's just do your homework, just be real. And this doesn't have to be this PC, put up a wall, use the right corporate lingo. Just let's have a natural conversation as we would about any project that we're working on. If you really want to get to know me and understand, and don't make things get to the point of what we're seeing in the US, then start to have a conversation about these things. Let's have these things in little steps and continue to grow from there, because we're doing it on a day-to-day basis in a company to build products. Why can't we do it on a just normal human level? And I think right. We just have to peel back the onions and realize that we've just put too much walls around talking about race in this country, and it's gotten to the point where the pressure cooker has started to explode. So we need to just be genuine and just want to learn about basic human differences. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Swathi or Aaron or Adam, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, Erica said the other day that if you're coming from a place of mutual respect, right? If you basically built up, rapport, you've talked to people, you know them, you don't have to be afraid of saying the wrong thing, right? If you respect somebody, they respect you. You say something that triggers them. You say something that just brain fart, whatever. You can have a conversation about that then, and you can grow from it. And so I think that's the first step, right? Is just talk to people.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, it is important because it goes both ways, right? Like respect on not just from your end, from their end, and listening too, right? Everyone has something to say, so especially in these times, it's just like brought to the forefront how important it is.
I think it's my job to take the first step. If I want to understand someone else, it's my job to take that step to build those relationships. And I can't remember who mentioned it, but like the real personal aspect of it, I think is really important. I find a lot of value, and I'm missing out on it a lot because of this COVID situation, but one-on-one FaceTime with people over lunch in casual situations over coffee. I really encourage you to build relationships with as many people as possible. And you won't look at people as categories. You'll look at them as people.
Yeah. And I've always said, the world doesn't have a diversity problem, because we already know there's diverse cultures. For instance, and this is what I tell my girls who code group. I use this analogy. I say, well, just think of your drawer of socks. You have different color socks. You have different color socks. We don't have a diversity problem. What we have is a cultural awareness problem. Like, where did that person come from? How do I talk to that person? And then also we have a problem when we assume that person is what we think about in our head, and they're not without having a conversation. So those things need to stop. Stop assuming that because the way that person looks, they act a certain way based on a myth or a stereotype or something else that you have read or seen online, because we are all individual people and we all act and think as individuals versus what you see on a movie, on TV, on a video or something else. Have a conversation. Don't be so surface level. Dig in and dive deep and say, like, well, you don't have to do a deep dive, but at least like, hey, why did you say that? And unpackage that. And that's where the point that we really need to get to. Nancy's back. Yay!
feel like I'm messing this whole thing up.
No, you're not. It's okay. Did you have anything to add, Nancy?
I'm not sure what question we were. I'm asked. Sorry.
Do you want, I'll rephrase it. So it's like recently I was asked by non-Black people about you know what can allies do to help people of color. So they posed the question back at me, and I opened up the conversation with that, and we all kind of spoke about it. And then you started on it, but then you dropped out.
Oh, okay. Well, I did hear quite a bit of what you guys had to say. I think that the only thing I would add to that is that I'm sorry I'm like getting a little stuck, because I think the point is I would want people to actually try to find someone, try to figure out a way to make change within their own establishment. And so I think it's important to know that, I mean, people have been asking me, for example, is calling the governor enough, or is calling somebody out enough? But I think that it's really about making sure that we go to our leaders, get a pledge going. I don't know if you guys know about the Black Tech, Black Lives pledge. You can Google that if you'd like to. We have a number of companies who are signing up for this pledge that are saying that they will actually do their job to hire folks who are Black and try to make sure that they're working with Black suppliers and vendors. And so it's a pledge, it's an oath, it has actual things that are actionable. It's been signed by a lot of the top tech leaders. I actually run Black and Tech Bay Area, where we have over 3,000 technical people who are behind quite a bit of this too. And so if you guys look that up, I'll see if I can get it dropped in the link as well. That's a place to start so that you can see that there are some things that you can do to take a pledge to honor that today or in the future you will commit to actually lifting up and doing an actual actionable step towards making our community better.
Yes. And then something else I wanted to add, also as a developer and also a designer, is like individuals were asking me, it's like, do you know any designers of color? I say, yeah, there's a whole darn group of them. I say because I'm getting off, because this also has to do with tech, because designers are in tech, and I noticed that a lot of Black designers are not getting hired. In the design industry, I think it's like 60% white, 11% mixed race, 9% Asian, 8% Latino, 3.3% Black, and 1% Native American. And there are tons of Black designers that are actually really good. But I think the reason why they're not also getting hired is because of their credentials, or they don't have a degree. And they think that equates to somebody having better skills. But I've seen people with a degree and with a quote unquote fake portfolio, but they get hired because of based on that. So we also need to look at the whole person, and if they don't have a degree, how did they get to the place that they were? We need to look at the whole self, because we take degrees and we take it as the gospel truth that, oh, well, I don't need to do any dives, when that's not necessarily the case, especially today with all these online tools and self-learning. And I feel that I think we need to start looking at the people, especially in HR, because a degree will also push you out of a job sometimes. And I'm happy that for Google that took out that you don't have to have a degree. But I pose the question of people who hire. Don't just hire somebody of color just because they're of color. Hire them because of their skill level, and hire that person because of their skill level, not necessarily their. But do a deep dive in there.
A thought that I had just while listening to you is that kind of an underrated thing that we don't talk about is that interviewing is a skill. And it's a skill, it's a very distinct from doing the actual job. And a lot of people that haven't gone to a university where they provide these resources haven't had the opportunity to learn that skill. And I've seen that play out during interviews in the workplace. And, I think if we want to make concrete steps towards helping increase diversity in the workplace, we can help teach people who haven't gone to a university how to interview.
Oh, that is perfect.
Yeah.
Do you have any resources or any, or maybe put it in later and maybe we can find
Yeah, I could think about some resources and put them in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Aaron. Sorry, whoops, Nancy.
Sorry, I had a conversation with some CEOs this morning around this topic, and we had a very, very, very comfortable conversation, honest conversation about what's going on as far as why they're not hiring certain folks. And the reality is, even with me, when I started getting opportunities as an engineer, as a human factors engineer, I remember seeing that they wouldn't even give me challenging work, right? They would actually literally, in bias within work, give me things that they thought I could handle, and then maybe give the Asian person something that was a lot more challenging. So I wasn't able to kind of grow my skill set. And so I say this to say that a lot of the times what they're finding is, at least with startups, for example, that they may not have the time to help with certain things, and so that kind of scares them off from hiring. But what I do with my own practice when I've been able to hire researchers and designers is that I actually create an associate level position, which requires somebody who's a lead to take some responsibility over growing the individual beneath them, right? And so, what it really, and of course, the ability to count or to hire maybe 2 people. I would really recommend, if you really care about this goal of diversity, that you think about leveling up in your hiring practice too. You have to show people that you're willing to take them under arm and help them and train them and get them where they need to be, just because I feel like we often forget as well that there is another bias with just the job opportunities we have in the first place to get us in the door. And a lot of the time I recognize when I worked at Google, for example, this is the honest to God truth, Google never hired anybody from an all-black school, HBCU, until 2016, and they hired 1 individual. That was the first time, even though they had mentors for years working in these schools. But it doesn't mean that they didn't have students or people at Google who have HBCU degrees. There's tons of people with HBCU degrees. They just never hired them directly from an HBCU. What that says to me, because they're hiring them from other companies, is they're not willing to take the chance to help them and educate them to get to the place where they need to be, because they clearly can do the job. So I just wanted to make sure that that's what accounted for. That a lot of the time what you're interviewing for is really sometimes a passion to learn. And if you can find that, I say you got to hire that person and take them under wing and give them a chance to show what they're worth.
I have
Anyway,
a couple of
that's my
points. The first one being, I'm in a space, data science, AI, that has a bias for PhDs. And I will tell you, you don't need a PhD to do this. To Nancy's point, I would rather work with someone that has the grit and passion to learn rather than hiring someone that comes from a well-minted school or has this, and knowing that that person is going to be hungry and willing to go out and learn and grow. The other thing I tell people is not every company is willing to teach you, but if you can go off and then start to learn things. One of the things I started doing is writing, blogging. You don't have to be perfect, but what you will see as you start to blog with time is that you've grown. And a lot of these things you can learn on your own, or you start talking to other people, going to meetup events, and then grow your skills. But I think there's a fundamental issue with interviews. They're interviewing and treating it as an exam. And I don't really think that it's fair for some candidates who would actually class themselves out of wanting to apply for a job because they don't think they meet some of the basic requirements, even though they can get the job done. So I think there's a fundamental problem that we know with interviews in general within this space that has to be fixed beyond getting someone to go through these rigorous processes of going through an interview that they can do the job for. It's just an added layer of stress on top of having to actually get through an interview process and then thinking that you're not qualified, then having to deal with the fact that you're different and you may not fit in. So I think fundamentally the system has to change. Yeah. And we have to move away from thinking that degrees are the only way to get these things done. And that's a big part of why there's no diversity in this particular space, but that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I could add to that. I've been in the industry almost 20 years. And the team that I work on is full of people that have 15, 20 years of experience. And if you're pulling from just people with 20 years of experience, you're pulling from a pool of people that is not as diverse as you want. And also, you're getting people who have 20 years of bias built up in the right way to do things. And so we found that we actually get better performing engineers who have 2 years of experience than 20 years of experience. In some cases, just like, I've done some work with machine learning. That's a great example. It's a field that has grown so much in the last 2 years that having 20 years of experience doesn't give you more of an advantage necessarily. Yep. And so there's a big pipeline problem. And I've had great success in our teams in having discussions with our leaders and saying, okay, we want to hire, senior people, but wouldn't it be better to hire a junior person and train them up? And that's going to both enhance the pool of candidates that we can grab from, and also then they're going to learn how we do things, and we don't have to deal with like the bias that they've already accumulated from other companies. Exactly. So you have some power to shape that as well in your company. It's like, what roles are really open? What roles do we really need, and what can we do about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I know we got to be wrapping up, but I want to say one last thing. So Adam was my mentor. Well, still is, but we're still pinging him for questions. And I remember when I first started, I was asking him all kind of questions. I was like, I felt really bad because I was like, I'm just asking him 1,000 questions. But he was so sweet, and it was just like, he was like, okay, think this through, and gave me problems, gave me challenges. And I just like, I'm getting emotional, but I was so appreciative because he took the time, and he didn't look like me. Did we look like each other? No. But he was just so genuine, and he was like, he helped me grow so much. And I just, for one, I just appreciate it. I appreciate everything that he's done. Especially for me, he gave me resources. He helped me understand. And at the time he was teaching, so he also let me in his curriculum for free. So I was like really grateful for that. But yeah, I just want to say, and thank you to every single panel guest, because I've learned so much from each and every one of you. Swathi, I worked before at Adaptive. Sparkle, we met each other in I think at a conference, and then we've been
this conference last year.
This conference last year, and we've been in contact with each other. Nancy, I heard you speak at a conference, and I was like in awe. I was like, I love the way you spoke your mind, and you were strong, and you were determined, and you were knowledgeable, and I was just like, I want to be her when I grow up. Adam, we met each other with Meetup Group, and you were so understanding, so genuine. And I appreciate you also listening to some of the things I had to say and offering me some advice. So I appreciate that. Erica, I just recently met and in a Sister Circle chat, and I commented on a couple of things. You probably all remember me that you posted, and we had a genuine conversation about this. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the panel. And I just want to say that I genuinely appreciate you, for one, taking the time, two, for being being involved in my life and now into everybody else's. And I just want to close with a quote from Frederick Douglass, like, you know, there is no, I was like, there is, if I can't even talk anymore. If there is no struggle, there's no progress. And with that meaning saying that sometimes we need to have a difficult and uncomfortable conversation in order to combat the problem that we currently have. And that's what I want to leave with everybody. Have a conversation. Don't be so, get a little bit deeper and know that actual person. And let's not look so much at, I know it's hard not to look at race, but just get to know the person and don't worry too much about the race. And that's my closing statement. If anybody has anything else to add, by all means.
I have something I want to add. Jasmine John posted a very good question, and if she can tag me directly, I have a very, very in-depth response that's probably going to go past the hour. But I too reached out to echo what Tarzine said as far as how she reached out to Adam. Even though I'm a director, I love to tinker and code. And so I wanted to get into web API development. And I reached out to a senior software engineer in the team, and he looks nothing like me. And I'm not going to say his last name. His name is Michael. But I just reached out to him and said, hey, look, I want to learn how to do this. Don't put me on the Kanban board, but assign me some stuff on the back end so I can work on it over the weekend. And so he mentors me on the side. And sometimes we have to do that. Especially if you want to, stay fresh on your skill. So I encourage you all, if there's something that you want to learn and somebody in the company is doing it, don't be afraid to reach out to them.
Yes. I think we're almost done. I don't know how this goes. I'm new to this.
Well, I am hiring a data integration engineer, and I am looking for women, particularly women of color. So, Tarzine, I can share my job description with you. I am the decision maker on this. So I'll send the job description. If we can get it out, I need to bring some diversity.
Oh, I should ask, is anybody else hiring? If they are, go ahead and speak up right now.
I know my team is hiring.
I am actually helping. I need a data analyst and a designer to help with this M-Train product where we're working on building learning awareness in compliance software. So if anybody has a data analyst background who's interested in changing behavior through a SaaS model, please contact me. I'm also looking for a designer. We have a great design team.
What type of designer are you looking for? I might have somebody. Well, let's talk offline. Sorry.
Yeah, because I want to ask you about the data analyst. I may have somebody too.
Adam or Aaron, are you two hiring?
Google is always hiring.
Yeah. But yeah, there's always roles.
There's always roles, yeah.
Not directly on my team.
Okay.
Yeah, I would encourage you
thank
if
you.
you're interested.
Jennifer, if you wanted to.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you all for everything that you offered on the panel today. Definitely love the enthusiasm. I definitely want you to share the roles, though, because I didn't want to stop that. But we will be moving next to our networking piece. Our closing keynote will be today at 3:30. So if anyone would like to head over to the networking space, go ahead and do over there. If there's any last minute questions, we have about 2 to 3 minutes if you all want to take any questions or anything like that. So I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone. Tarzine, thank you for moderating the panel. Thank you to Swathi, Sparkle, Aaron, Adam, Erica, and Nancy. We were so happy to have you here today, and thank you all to the viewers and our audience. We're so happy that you all were able to attend the panel, but any last minute thoughts, we definitely love to have you share them if anybody wants to share their last minute contact information with the audience.
Well, they can always reach me at Koalesce Designs. So it's Tarzine at koalescedesigns.com or on LinkedIn. Just give me on LinkedIn. It's easier.
Yeah. LinkedIn.
And I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn.
All right, awesome. Thank you all so much for your views today and your and the information that you shared. Definitely a great panel. We loved having just some of your feedback today on these questions. Definitely some things that we need to have addressed, and we enjoyed having your perspective on these questions today. So just want to thank everybody once again, and we look forward to networking with everybody and seeing everyone at the closing keynote.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.